Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you, all of you, for... I know that the weather conditions, the railway conditions, and others have been difficult in recent days, so thank you for all of you who've managed to make it with us, and thank you all of us who are following us remotely as well. This day is a little journey, if you will. It's a journey with many stops, many things to see and do. So thank you very much, first and foremost, to the Cité du Vin for organizing this colloquium, organized to mark, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Cité's creation. I'll start with thanks and recognitions, but these really are. I'd very sincerely thank the International Organisation for Vine and Wine, OIV, I would say Intervitis, we'll be hearing from them sometimes today, ANEV, the National Association for Elected Officials in Vine and Wine-Growing Regions, who've supported this, with, of course, the AREV as well, that's the European Association of Wine-Growing Regions. I'd like to sincerely thank them also. By way of an introduction, I'm going to hand us over, without further ado, to President Sylvie Cazes, and then we will have a brief whistle-stop tour of what you can expect to see today, the themes today. And we're starting with a question. That's the question which was up on the screen earlier. Is there any future for wine without culture? That's the question which we're going to be attacking from different angles throughout the day, and it's anything but a simple question. It's a real question which has real implications for each and every one of us. And so, again, without further ado, over to Sylvie Cazes, President for the Foundation for Wine, Civilization and Culture. This is, as a teacher in a former life, I do like to be standing up when I talk, so I'll stand by the lectern. So, Mr. President, Madam, Presidents, Managing Directors, dear friends, I'm not going to list everyone by name because I'll leave someone out, I'm sure. Thank you first and foremost, on behalf of the whole Cité du Vin team, for being with us today for this event, which is an important event, an event that we're very happy to host here. Why are we so happy to host it? Well, because obviously, it's an emotional occasion for all of us. It's marking a milestone. The adventure of the Cité du Vin started back in 2008, and it's been a reality for 10 years. 10 years the Cité du Vin has been open, and many of you who are in the room with us today, we're here. We're here right at the Mr. President, but others also. You were there at the beginning, and at the beginning of that adventure, it was made possible by a lot of people who supported us, got behind the project from the very beginning, not just here in Bordeaux, but from all over the world. We are and remain very grateful for all that support. But it's been 10 years now, since 1st of June, to be precise, 2016, when the Cité du Vin opened its doors for the first time to the public. It was a project which was led by the vision of Alain Juppé and certain members of the wine sector who, against all odds and all obstacles, maintained the motivation of it to see this project over the line and make this Cité du Vin, this place, a reality. Since then, we've welcomed 3.5 million visitors. The architectural signature of Cité du Vin has become iconic for Bordeaux, well known in France and far beyond. 365,000 bottles of wine, which have been tasted here, offered by our partners, presented by our partners in France and from all over the world, because we do have partnerships with 50 wine-growing regions all over the world. We've hosted 750 cultural events here, 10 artistic exhibitions. You'll remember the Bistro, the Picasso exhibition, of course. And the permanent exhibition has already been changed once into a second incarnation. And we also, of course, now have Via Sensoria, our sensory immersive experience, been open for 3 years. And 3,500 corporate events opened here. And all thanks to our network of 150 sponsors and grand donors. And once again, I'll take this opportunity to thank, I'm sure there will be some of our donors and sponsors here in the room. And I think we can never thank them enough for all they've done to make it possible for this place of wine to... Thank you. Yeah, we can. Round of applause for what they've done for the culture of wine. So, well, I've asked for a little definition of culture. It's an ensemble of traditions, knowledge, specific to cultural groups, and transmitted between cultural groups. That sounds like a scientific definition, but it's not really complicated when you drill down to it. What is culture? Culture is a sample of knowledge and practices passed down from generation to generation to different means, technologies, and different forms. To what end? What's the point of culture? It's a force for cultural cohesion, for direction, for adaptation, and it defines the identity of our societies. And that's something to mull. Culture is constantly evolving and transforming. It's transformed by innovation, by intercultural discipline, immigration, technological change. Culture can be material and intangible or intangible. It can be transmitted socially and is constantly renewed and evolving. That's why we're here. Culture plays a central role in the construction of our individual and collective identities. And that's why we're here today. And that's why, once again, I want to thank you all, because we know culture is constantly moving. Here at Cité du Vin, we're part of a movement which started 8,000 years ago. That's what the cultural movement of wine. It might have been earlier. That's the earliest evidence we have is 8,000 years, but we'll hear from the historians throughout today. But what I find fascinating about this is the diversity that we have on the panel today, the diversity of speakers, the diversity of subjects we're going to be discussing today. And I think that really is testimony to the cultural richness of the Cité du Vin, of our cities, our wine centres, because others in France also, and the mission that we share, to share with as many people as possible that culture of wine and how it fits into our society. In conclusion, I'd like to share a little story with you. There's something that happened 13 years ago. We were in New York with Alain Juppé, the former mayor of Bordeaux, with a delegation, and the Americans decided to put on a ceremony at the UN building to talk about the Cité du Vin, the project, the Cité du Vin project. So the idea was we're going to bring together as many people as possible, get some ambassadors, people who are interested in wine culture, get them all together at the UN building. It was incredible. I don't know if you know the UN building in New York. It's fantastic. So we had a wonderful day. But since that day, we've been told that the Cité du Vin should be called the UN of wine. We should call it the United Nations of wine. And I think that's the spirit that we still work in, of championing, transmitting, sharing the culture of wine worldwide. Thank you all. Thank you, Mrs. Cazes. Bernard Farges, I'll call you to the lectern next. Oh, thank you, Sylvie. Bernard, you're going to stay seated? Oh, sorry, no. You're going to stay seated, or are you going to stand up as well? No. Feel free. Feel free. Get the blood flowing. It's still early in the morning. Bernard Farges. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. Jérôme, John, thank you for joining us. And as Sylvie has already covered quite a lot of ground, but what an adventure it's been, and it is moving to be here to marking this anniversary. Since 2008, and the first idea germinated, and now here we are. But 10 years ago, I remember the president being here, Alain Juppé being here. And that things were very different. The way things have gone since 2016 and 2025, because wine culture is in difficulty, and the consumption of wine is in difficulty. The trends weren't so good 10 years ago, but over the past 10 years, things have certainly not got any better. We need to share, to pass on, to transmit this culture of wine, the values of wine. Because wine is all about pleasure, about conviviality, and for all those who like the finer things of life, like to enjoy lives, and that includes it's spiritual, it's cultural food in a way, isn't it? And we need to go out there and win over new consumers worldwide who don't know wine, who don't understand wine. Hence the point of sharing the broader culture of wine. I know we're going to hear a lot more about it today, all the many facets of wine. Culture and the connections between culture more broadly and the culture of wine, but that cultural spirit, the interest in culture is, and history, the transmission of wine is something which has really been in trouble recently. Things have been in decline for some years now. So it's really, thank you very much, in that case, for all of you being here, for taking part in this, the challenge that we face to win over and transmit this culture to new consumers. Thank you. We'll talk about there are a couple of cartoons which will be popping up throughout the day. I should have explained this perhaps before I hand over to Jérôme Sourrisseau, Vice President of the National Association for Elected Officials in the wine industry. Thank you very much. I am very happy to be with you today, representing the ANEV, that's the National Association for Elected Officials with interest in wine. It's very frustrating in some respect when it was such a broad question, what is wine culture, just to have so little time to speak. I'm a wine grower myself in Cognac and Vice President of the Grand Cognac conurbation. And that, I have to say that because we need a bit of context of what I want to say, because there's wine, and sometimes wine becomes something different. And in Cognac, we distill wine to make Cognac, obviously, which is Cognac occupies a slightly special place here in the border Cité du Vin, because we're not far away. It's about 100 kilometers away, Cognac, but it is kind of between two chairs. It's wine, but it's also something else. So in terms of culture, it is different. Cognac, as I'd say, is different but complementary. I had to point that out. But not least because in Cognac, the bottles, the history, the global approach, the culture that we have is so rooted in culture. And that's why we felt it's so important for Cognac to be represented here today. And I could say a few things to support that argument. Like the first thing, for example, when a Cognac house wants to promote its product, it's very often connected with music. You may have seen the latest adverts that have been used in the US. A lot of rap music, a lot of clubs, Afro-American music. The Cognac has been really deeply associated with black music in America for a long time. You go to China, on the other hand, Cognac is associated with classical music, but it has that cultural roots. There's also a certain architectural culture, because Cognac needs to be aged for many years, because Cognac can be aged for 50, 60 years in barrels. So we've had to construct barrel cellars for more than 300 years. They're the oldest from 300 years old, which have really shaped the landscape, the architectural landscape of Paris. And so the architectural culture is a key part of Cognac culture. There's another dimension of culture we could cite would be the intangible culture of Cognac, because Cognac is spread all over the world. Since Cognac was invented, it's been consumed all over the world. And so Cognac, we have a culture which is local, which has been open to the world since the early 18th century, which I think is part of the reason why the region of Cognac previously was very Protestant rather than Catholic, because of the geopolitical history of Cognac, with the opening up to different trade routes, to different ways of doing things, different ways of seeing the world. And that really has shaped the culture of our city, our region, and our territory. In all modesty, I think we have a very open humanist, for sure. There's a recent president of the Republic illustrated this recently, saying that things take time. And Cognac, I think we understand that very well, that time is the only way to obtain a Cognac of quality. And there's a former president of the Republic who was born in Cognac, understood that very well. And I think that explains part of the heritage, the culture that we have. In Cognac, the son sells the Cognac that was made by the father, the grandfather even. We understand the importance of generational transmission, and they're being rooted in the culture, and that is shapes the cultural universe which defines our region, our product. We also have a number of events in Cognac, cultural events, which are we have the Cognac Festival, we have a Sommelière Festival, all of these things. I wanted to list all of them because the answer to the question, is there a future for wine without culture? I mean, the answer for me is very clearly no. There is no future at all without culture. And that's hence my association, our commitment to culture. And since time immemorial, unlike certain other parts of other parts of the world, winemaking world have their own distinctive bottles. The Bordeaux bottle, the Champagne bottle. Cognac has always adapted, and the shape of the bottle is always completely. And and then the visual aspect, the visual form has always been evolved, and that's led to a real artistic culture, working with crystal, with the glass, with different forms, shapes, processes, artistic processes, which again is another form of culture, another facet, dimension of the culture of cognac. So, yeah, just taking illustrations, examples from my own experience. I think that's what I want to do this morning, is just to say to you, in my understanding and my experience, we have a particularly strong understanding in cognac of the importance of culture to us. So I think things are slightly different in cognac, but I think something we all share with other winemaking regions, that appreciation of the culture. And if wine is not a cultural product, then what is it? I think if it's not culture in the world, the way things are going in this world, with the vulnerabilities, the uncertainties that we know in the world, imagine 10, 15 years from now ago, you might be able to just conjure up, 3D print any drink you want. It could be Red Bull and cognac, with or without alcohol, 10, 15, 20, put your numbers into a computer, come up with any drink you want. If that happens in the future, how will we, and you can probably get it delivered to you by a drone in your house whenever you're ready. So how do we set ourselves apart from that? What makes us better? Well, it's our culture, it's our history, it's our centuries of shared experience culture. And that's the only way that I think we're going to set ourselves apart, with the way changing consumption habits, different health preoccupations. If we don't root ourselves and base ourselves on our culture, our history, then I think we'll struggle for the future. So hence the importance of this. Thank you very much. So, wow, I think there were 3 or 4 things that we could really have given us food for thought and discussion for hours, but we've got to move on. Maylis Descazeaux, you're next, Regional Director for Cultural Affairs for the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to have been invited to be here with you today to discuss this important question: is there a future for wine without culture? And as representative of the Ministry for Culture here in Nouvelle-Aquitaine, I would say that this, the title of this curriculum, when I saw the title, I wonder if it was found it a little bit surprising. I think everyone knows the answer, don't we? Well, I mean, it seems so obvious that wine and the wine growing sector, the industry, are such an important symbols, elements of French culture and of our international reputation. And it's true that in France, internationally, wine, culture, those things are indissolubly linked to France and its image. How does that relationship work, though, today? Perhaps is the relationship between wine and culture so as dynamic as it ever has been? Is it as obvious as it's ever been? And I think the answers, and we're going to hear them throughout the day. To begin with, just look at the building where we're sat, and we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of this wonderful place, and the work that's done by Anouk Legendre and Luc Lemaizière, the architects and this building, which has become a new landmark in the landscape of Bordeaux. It's hard to imagine the city without it. And more, perhaps equally as important as the building is what's inside, the cultural offering, the thriving cultural community that's grown up here, which is not always the case. But I think for me, it goes to show that for tourists, whether they be French or international, culture and wine remain intimately connected. We could also talk about the great architecture that you find throughout the Bordeaux region, not just in Cognac, but here in Bordeaux. There are some architectural landmarks. I won't list them all, but I'm sure you're familiar with some of the exceptional architecture that we find in the region, making it unique in the wine-growing world. We could also talk about the Bordeaux wine region. Again, not, Mr. President, not just here in Bordeaux, I know, but since we are in Bordeaux, we could talk some of the great names of Bordeaux wine, some of the great architects who've worked here, and not just for making wine, making chateaus and barrel cellars, but also the diversity of cultural events, concerts, exhibitions. It's not just about the containers, but what goes inside. And we could talk also about theatre, the rich offering of theatre we have region. I mean, does culture have a future without wine? That's perhaps an interesting way of flipping the question. if there's no future for wine without culture, is there any future for culture without wine? In any case, I'm so happy to see so many of you here to discuss that question today, and I hope you all will have a very fruitful day. Thank you. So there's an interesting for an idea to talk about theatre and living spectacle. That's a good idea. And now, for last but by no means least, John Baker, Managing Director of the International Organisation for Vine and Wine, the OIV. John Baker, going to join us here at the lectern as well. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to need my glasses. On behalf of the OIV, I am delighted to be here with you in Bordeaux today. Bordeaux is the world's leading wine cities. It is here that the first World Wine Congress. I'm just trying to read my notes here. That's right. It was here that the first World Wine Congress was held 98 years ago, where the idea of creating an international definition of wine was first proposed. It's very important. And I'm thrilled to be able to celebrate with you the 10th anniversary of the Cité du Vin, which is a superb asset for the wine growing sector in the whole world. Really a beacon of world wine culture. I'm also very happy to be invited to take place in this colloquium, which raises a question which I think is particularly significant. Is there a future for wine without culture? For me, the answer is very simple. Culture is what sets wine apart from other products, and spirits, wine-based spirits, of course. Mr. Sourrisseau, culture encapsulates the primary value of wine, a dynamic global wine culture, which is the key to the future of our industry, of our sector. That's why the OIV remains committed to promoting the culture of wine growing, winemaking, and wine. In 1980, the OIV was founded as the international reference, the international organization for the wine industry. We bring together members from 51 countries all over the world to share information, to promote research, and to produce recommendations in response to the main scientific and technical questions facing our sector. You may not be familiar with this, actually, but with the international treaty which founded the OIV, we have a special mission. It's in our objectives to contribute to the promotion, to the recognition of the global wine culture and heritage, promoting its historical, cultural, human, and socio-environmental credentials. There are reasons, particularly good reasons, to insist particularly on the importance of wine culture in the current climate. Our sector is facing an accelerated transformation of consumption habits and consumer preferences, at the same time as a broader social transformation, a wave of social transformation which is raising questions about wine culture, about vine growing culture. How do we reconcile this rich, diverse heritage, our traditions and practices, with the need to continue engaging with new consumers whose cultural reference points are so different? For thousands of years, a vast history of cultural manifestations, of dances, of festivals, of know-how, of architecture, of landscapes, and so many other different facets of wine culture has accrued around vines and wines. It's a dynamic, living heritage which is spread all over the world, as far as New Zealand. How can we recognize and champion this repertory of values, of know-how, of understanding of this cultural assets? How do we pass them on to future generations in a way which is pertinent to new audiences? There are many leading and big initiatives in wine-growing regions all over the world, which are championing in their own way the culture, the heritage of wine. Some of the most impressive and inspirational examples include the Cité du Vin. At the OIV, we're thinking very hard about the role that we play as an intergovernmental international organization for imagining new ways of recognizing and championing the value of wine culture at an international level. There is a real need now to speak at an international level about the cultural value of wine, our contribution to regional development, of course, always within the context of a reasonable, moderate consumption. We need to be factual. We need to base our arguments on science, on evidence. We've already started working enthusiastically and with a lot of experts, some of whom were with us in the room today, on this essential subject. And I very much hope that the OIV will continue to play a major role in securing the recognition of the importance of wine culture globally in the future. I'd like to wrap up by warmly congratulating the organizers for this extremely important event, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing the presentations from the excellent panel of speakers who've been lined up for today. And, of course, I'm looking forward to some very lively debates and discussions afterwards. And a constantly evolving, inclusive, global wine-growing culture is the key to our collective future, and I am certain that that will be reflected in the discussion that we'll be hearing today. And I believe very firmly also that Bordeaux has an important role to play in this future, because Bordeaux has all the strength, the assets needed to make a difference, because the reputation of this region, the richness of its culture, its capacity for innovation, and its historic role, its pioneering role in the sciences of vine and wine science. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you. I'll take the opportunity of this moment to mention the cartoonist who has been drawing for us, Urbs, who's at the back in the control room. He already works for Sud-Ouest and the Canard Enchaîné, and also for La Mauvaise Réputation, where you can meet him. Today he's hidden away at the back so that he can sit there drawing, but you will see his work popping up on the screen during the day. So I would like to thank you for that introduction. Thank you to all four of you. And stay with us. You have defined the course for the day's debates and proceedings. So we can now move on directly to Pascaline Lepeltier. She is a philosopher. She wanted to be a professor, a university professor, when she was young. And in fact, she is the first woman to have been France's best sommelier, and also is now a philosopher who is going to give us a very cultural view of today's subject. If we could begin the video, and then we can react afterwards. Hello. First of all, I would like to apologize that I can't be with you at the magnificent Cité du Vin today for your day of discussions and thinking, which I think will be very stimulating. And it is important to talk about this pillar of human civilization. And today, you have a very important subject. I would like to thank sincerely the team of the Cité du Vin for allowing me to speak, even if it is remotely, and I consider it an honor. It's the first time I have had to open a conference, so I have written a text, And I apologize if I am beginning the day by reading my text to you. I was presented very kindly as being a philosopher. In fact, I'm a former student of philosophy, and I'm going to talk to you today about my point of view today as an active sommelier working in New York as an expat, about wine and its culture. Why is this day on the theme of wine and culture so important? It's because we are at a moment when culture and wine are endangered. So for a year now, the media have been telling us about the direct attacks on culture and cultures at the highest level of the US state, for example, to take example of the cultural and educational system, closing the Department of Education, wanting to close the Department of Education, changing cultural policies, budget cuts in research and in public media, taking control over the programming of institutions. It is a culture war which is underway at present in the US and which I am experiencing directly. But it's not only official culture with a capital C which is being attacked, it's all forms of culture, doing away with all equity or diversity initiatives and introducing a very aggressive migration policy. And wine does not escape this, at least here, and is also in danger. In my view, it's in danger with climate change and its effects on with problems of drought and fires, which are having an impact on wine growing in California, for example. And also insurance is becoming very expensive, unaffordable for wine estates. Then there are also predators and diseases which are reappearing, spreading more quickly than ever, helped by the number of abandoned vineyards which have just been left standing. And then there's the question of agricultural labor who are being hunted, the laborers who are being hunted down with all the consequences that this implies. Distribution systems are under strain, and a lot of producers are in very great difficulty as they try to sell their wines, and even those who have very long mailing lists are having difficulties distributing their products. Unfortunately, what is true for California is also true for the other great wine-growing states in the US. Washington, Oregon, New York, Texas are all facing similar issues. Then there's also, obviously, the elephant in the room, the sensitive subject of the sharp shrinking or decline in demand and the changes in consumption. This can be explained, among other things, by a general intergenerational trend towards drinking less alcohol, a preference for cannabis with its therapeutic connotations and lower prices, and also the question of semaglutides, which has an impact on the digestibility of alcohol. However, there is another explanation for this decline in the market. There's a less public, less visible trend, but which is also very active, which is the lobbying of the neo-prohibitionists who want to take control of the rules on public health and alcohol. We've already seen the consequence of these temperance movements with the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, and also at the United Nations session in New York, where there were debates on the question. Obviously, wine is being caught up in this, but not just any wines. It's not as a cultural object that wine is being attacked here, because what these groups are trying to do is to try to stop wine being a culture, undermine its status as a culture. So in these discussions, wine is being deprived of its culture and addressed only through its chemical content. And does wine have a future without this culture? Without culture, no. Wine has very little future. If we just base ourselves on the short-term profit of the product, which is the only important principle in current US policy, wine cannot rival with other drinks, where production is more easily industrialized, stabilized, and marketed at lower cost. So this may all sound very negative. I think I am being realistic here, and we should see this not as an invitation to react, but rather to act, and to act in a pragmatic way, but also, and above all, to act to work towards an ideal, and that's why we are here, or you are here today in Bordeaux, brought together by this profound belief in the idea that humanity should not be based on the survival of the fittest or the strongest, but based on the different cultures which make our lives better and make our societies more resilient and more inclusive. So we need to be clear-sighted about this. Obviously, there are risks of addiction and risks of negative impacts for society. There are also changes underway in agricultural models more generally, but we also have to be clear-sighted about the dominant economies of wine, which have been the model over the last 40 years, and their limits. So for me, it is important that we should work on the genealogy of wine, as you will be doing here in the auditorium today, to listen to a historian like Olivier Jacquet, or to Laurent Ménétrier, or to agricultural engineers, or to Véronique Lemoine from the Cité du Vin. I think it's essential to hear these voices to inform us on the origins of the current policies and find a response, because it's some of the criticisms of wine and its culture and the way it is shared can be criticized. So today we have to perhaps go further and find new ideas. And there's, for example, the dichotomy between nature and culture, which I think we have to overcome by a new approach to wine growing, and to tasting. We have to be pragmatic in our approach, because the decisions that are made today will have genuine impacts very quickly of the short, medium, and long term, and can be very problematic. And I think that can be a problem if we do not act quickly. Therefore, for this, we need to take action. We need to be effective. And yet, we shouldn't just go for immediate, quick wins through scattered, isolated solutions. I would like to be pragmatic and not focus just on resilience, but look for a form of robustness, as Olivier Hamon has proposed, and whose work I think you should read if you're not familiar with him already. And that is why it is important that we should learn from the people in the field and from their experience. And today, I would like to laud the quality and the interdisciplinary nature of the panel discussions that will be held today. I know that they will come up with concrete, sustainable, global solutions that can be implemented to take initiatives combining both the public and private spheres. But above all, and finally, we need to continue believing in this ideal that wine is central to culture and even to civilization. This, and obviously this is denied by very powerful groups today, but we need to be the driving force this needs to be the driving force that can carry us forward to overcome the obstacles. I talked about this as an ideal, but I think this ideal is something I experience every day in the restaurant where I am here today, around the table. For me, it's a natural desire to nourish ourselves, which brings people to the restaurant, but there's also a fundamentally human need for sociability and for the symbolic. Alcohol and wine have ritual status and can play a role in for us. And quoting Patrick McGovern, an anthropologist who just left us, because I see in my restaurant the power of wine. When the choice of the bottle, when pairing it with the food, when all this is handled with sincerity and with know-how, by listening to the guests, there is an atmosphere of confidence, of trust, which is established, and these can be magical, profound moments around the table. The need to eat and drink is satisfied, but it goes much further than that. It's satisfied with joy, with pleasure, with curiosity, with empathy. And this is what touches me the most and surprises me the most, is no matter what the origins, this really is transcultural. So these moments where wine becomes culture, where wine touches us, inspires us, and drives our curiosity and our creativity, for me, are moments I don't just see in my restaurant. I see this through the thousands of seeds that are sowed in the whole chain today in many different areas, with wine growers who are committed, who are becoming generally sustainable in their methods. Also in the systems, like in Bordeaux, with sustainability labels. Also in teaching, new ways of teaching, new ways of tasting, taught in France, or the work of Nicolas Ponza in France, in Italy, also in Bordeaux, in institutions like this, with their ecumenical role to share this culture of wine. I also see this in this day of discussions, which will be ending on the subject of new narratives to try to establish an ideal and a mythology towards which we can work. So to answer this question of the day, wine without culture does not have a future, but that future is being written today, and for that, wine has to be a part of our daily life, so that its culture and its cultures can be reinvented and can reinvent humanity as it has done for as long as there have been humans and wine. In the winery, in restaurants, in society, each of us must nourish this and share this culture. So I wish you all a very enjoyable day of discussions, and I will be looking forward to listening. And I thank you for your commitment to this magnificent product that is wine.